Next up, we have Royal Sumikat, a Houston-based artist, to talk about the Secret Society of Grief, which is a public art piece. If you could please save your questions for the end and do the same thing, raise your hand. I'll bring the mic over to you. But without further ado, Royal.
Thank you. Thanks, y'all. Okay, so this is my illustration that I created called The Secret Society of Grief. And I feel like the placard explains it, pretty much basic. I wrote a poem after losing my father in 2022. Um, and and then so this is the visual accompaniment, like if it was like a visual version of the poem. And I'm gonna just read the poem in case y'all haven't read it yet. And it's grief is a secret society, a mystery school of initiates who gather to hold each other up and only speak of it discreetly to protect the comforts of the uninitiated. So I'm pretty sure a lot of folks are part of the grief society as we've entered this grief portal that is COVID. But I mean, people are dying every day anyway. So I didn't real like whenever that experience happened to me, it was like incredibly devastating because I'm also working and doing other things outside of just grieving. I don't think we have the container to grieve in a capitalist, fast-paced society. And whenever my, when that experience happened, I am very fortunate. My family's very fortunate that we just didn't grieve in isolation. And I know a lot of people are doing that, which, I really feel I empathize with. And if anybody wants to grieve, I'm part of the Dead Dads Club. But so whenever that happened, my dad, I feel, is a very monumental person in the Filipino community that I am a part of because he he's an immigrant because forced because of the dictator that devastated the country. So millions of Filipinos had to leave the country to send remittances back home. And I'm going to tell this whole long story. This is the context for that. But my dad created a group, like created a community with people that he lived with in Saudi Arabia and he worked with. And whenever there was a economic downturn in Saudi Arabia, a lot of people were laid off and sent back to the Philippines or Pakistan or India or Malaysia. Saudi Arabia was just like this huge, like, hub of like hiring overseas migrants or whatever. Um, One of my dad's coworkers said he was moving back to Texas to start, a company here and would love for my dad to, be a part of that. And so my dad, and he was like, you can head this department and you can hire anybody you want. So what my dad did was he hired everybody in Saudi Arabia that he was in community with. So a lot of the people ended up moving from, like, who was sent back to the Philippines had another opportunity to come here so they could also send remittances back home. And me and my family are the only like blood family that is my family. All of my actual blood relatives live in the Philippines, but because of the community that my dad has fostered and created, I have family. It's like chosen family. And so anyways, that happened. We grew up like, the families had kids, the kids became friends, etc. And then when my dad passed away, it was like this whole community that he helped foster were the ones that was the grief society that surrounded my dad. I told this story in my eulogy that like on my 7th birthday, the same people that attended my 7th birthday party in Saudi Arabia were the same folks that were at my dad's funeral. And so I, so this piece is talking about, and what I noticed was talking about grief as a person who's grieving to other people who wants to comfort you. It feels different if they've never lost somebody in that way versus somebody who is who actually lost their mom or their dad. And I'm not saying that the people who've never lost anybody can't comfort me. It also just feels like well, how can you know, how can you know, and I'm not saying that they're being inauthentic or disingenuous, but I feel like there's some sort of like community around grieving that a lot of people can't really provide you if they've also never lost somebody. So this piece, what this means is, the person in the middle, this is a new initiate to the secret society. The crystal represents the love that you had with the person that you've lost, and it's pretty immense and rare because that's what love is like. And when you've lost somebody, you take on that what was once beautiful is now this like immense weight, because the more you love or the stronger the connection, the heavier the loss, which is the double-edged sword for loving. And so the other people around them are also initiates of the grief society. They're carrying their own crystals, meaning that they've also lost somebody, but the different size crystals kind of represent the length of time from when you've lost somebody. So the longer you're part of this society, the smaller the crystal gets, not representing that like grief gets easier to carry as time goes on. And then as the crystal gets smaller, you also have the capacity to support a person who's carrying a really large crystal. The intention with kind of the anonymity of their faces, like you can't see their face, it's I see it as like you don't know the immense, like you don't know who's part of the society or the immense weight that people carry in their day-to-day lives based off of the grief that where we have. And it's also because we don't have these ritual containers for grief. It's also kind of like taboo to talk about it. I know when people ask like, oh, why did you cut your hair? I'm like, oh, my dad died, and it just feels like, oh, I'm so sorry, like I'm so sorry I even asked about your hair. And it's like, yeah, I want to talk about it. And I feel like not being able to talk about it, that there's no container for it, so it kind of spills out in ways that you don't even expect. Like you could be at work and then you just start crying profusely, or you hear a song that reminded you of that person and you're like in a very inconvenient place. But now I'll just cry, whatever. Whatever. But yeah, that's my piece. Thank you. If y'all have any questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you. So, I lost my father shortly. Well, Royal and I met online. We've never met in person before,
This
but
is my first time meeting you.
yeah,
Thank you
that's
for
pretty
coming.
cool. Yeah. So I lost my father, shortly before you did, during COVID. Well, he didn't die of COVID. He died of brain cancer during COVID. But and I've been thinking about grief a lot too. I'm actually working on a poetry collection about grief right now. So this piece really resonated to me, in addition to just liking you as a person. And I just was wondering, in addition to sort of the personal feeling, I've been thinking a lot about, because you said something in that poem about, everyone gets initiated into the society. It's sort of natural, like when you're going through it, to lean on people who've been through it, and then to be that for somebody else after they do it, after you've gone through it, right? And so I'm just kind of wondering beyond that, because I know you do other activist work and things like that. Do you, besides the personal sort of feeling of grief that you're expressing here, is there any sort of political or revolutionary sort of conception of grief that might be channeled in a way that builds community further? I don't know if you've thought about that at all, but I'm just kind of curious about it. So,
have I thought about any revolutionary aspects of grief? I think, yeah. I feel like because of the fact that nobody has time to grieve because we have to work. And I think that like creating spaces to grieve, and then also acting upon this grief and not just like keeping it contained, you know what I mean? I feel like, okay, so there's no spaces to grieve. What are we going to do about that as a community, or how we like speak with each other? There's always like, what is that, like Suicide Awareness Week? It's like everybody is aware that people do that, so what are we going to do about it? We can't just like reshare some post every time it's Suicide Week. How are we cultivating connections so people don't feel like they're disconnected. And like, how are we treating our children who are like the most oppressed class in society and experiencing this grief now that you know, I feel like back then there was like, without this COVID portal, I feel like it was easier to kind of hide stuff from kids, but now it's just like, how? Like, so, so yeah. Thank you for that question. Yeah.
Was it always your intention to have the piece outside?
Yes.
It was?
Yes.
Can you talk
Bridget
more about
asked
that?
me. Well, Bridget asked me about this platform. I actually thought it was on the other side, but she explained that it was going to be an outside piece. And I said yes because there was like no, I guess, like guidelines except like just do what you want. And I know the guidelines for public art is nothing lewd or, you know, racist, sexist, sexual, whatever. So I'm like, I have a lot to say, so that's why I said yes to this piece. Yeah. Thank you.
Was it difficult to create art through the grief? Like, was this a transmutation process, or did you have to force yourself, or did it come naturally? Can you speak to that?
It comes, I think a lot of, I don't, my friend Matt, he mentioned that his art is autobiographical, and I'm thinking like, is it all art autobiographical? Because I think this came naturally because of what was happening. I wrote the poem, and then it was easier to create like a visual of it because the poem has been written. But also I wanted to provide context on like how I create a lot of my illustrations these days. Is like, I'm in an ambulance, and it's like during my break that I'm like sitting in a parking lot with my Procreate waiting for like a call. And so that's also like, I'm already in this environment of kind of like solemnness. So I feel like it's all just like the environment is feeding off of like, yeah. Bridget? Oh, Bridget.
So you know that I already consider you a total multi-dimensional creative force.
Thank you.
But can you talk a little bit, and Rachel and I were talking about this just last night, about how writing and visual art kind of dovetails for you? What comes first? How do those two forces kind of work in your practice?
Okay, I don't even think I'm a writer. That's the thing. Like, I don't write. No, I'm saying.
Oh, whatever, dude. I've got links. You're writing that I can send you. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, I don't know. So see, I never thought about that. I'm just like, I feel like I'm just writing because I feel like I have a lot of things to say. But I never think of it like I'm gonna write so people could see it. But apparently people have seen it. And so I'm just like, a lot of it is like things that I'm trying to, I feel like I want to say something, and then I'll just like write a Facebook post about it, and if people want to interact with it, like that's my writing. It's not like an official works of Royal Sumikat 2022. Here's a question that you posed on Instagram or whatever. Like,
You have a book coming out.
what? No.
Yeah. My stories are in it too.
Okay, it's a short, yeah, it's a collective essays.
I mean, come on now. Author. Hello.
I guess I don't take inventory about my writing enough, but I'm actually surprised that I guess I'm a writer. This is news to me. So yeah. Oh, hey Mark, thank you for coming.
This is a small question, and I probably missed the first part, but was this all done digitally?
Yes, I drew it in Procreate on my iPad sitting in an ambulance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Royal, for sharing.
Thank you. Thank y'all.